Chapter 4 is entitled Before the Storm. Oh my. Day 4, morning. Twilight couldn't get back to sleep. Spike stayed up with her and tried to get her to calm down. She'd finally admit to herself, and to Spike, why she had such a hard time sleeping. Maybe you should go talk to someone, Twilight, Spike offered. You? I'm sure your friends could help you. You're her friend. Pretty much. Assistant? Friend? So what? They coincide. What the hell? I don't know, Spike. Who could I talk to about this? She asked him. All of her friends were dear to her, but she didn't think any of them would be able to help her with this kind of problem. She moved to get out of her bed, went over to the window, and took a seat to look out at it. The weather patrol had started to move clouds in. It was still early morning, the faintest hints of celestial sunlight starting to come in over the horizon. What about Rarity? Spike asked her. She gave him a look, but she was actually sincere in his suggestion, not just looking for an excuse to visit Rarity. She tilted her head a bit, unsure why he suggested her. I know Rarity's talent isn't in magic, but she's another unicorn. She might be able to offer some advice, Spike went on to explain his reasoning for suggesting her. Twilight thought about his suggestion for a few minutes. Maybe, Spike. I guess I could go and talk to her about this later today, she replied before going back to her thoughts. She almost wished Trixie had been in town. After she and her friends had gotten her free of the control of the Alicorn amulet, they had been on better terms, and she was another unicorn with talent and magic. She sighed to herself and got to her hooves, but Trixie was off performing in Manhattan, last she heard. She moved away from the window and went to her bathroom. She knew one of the things that Rarity would suggest would be a hot shower. That was one thing she could on her own now. She got into the shower and turned the water on. She relaxed under the hot stream of water. She felt the steaming water soothe away her worries as she relaxed. It definitely helped her relax a little. She used her magic to get her mane and coat shampoo was as well as a sponge and started to wash herself off. While Twilight was in the shower, Spike decided to get started with his chores early. He was worried about Twilight. As long as he had known her, he could remember seeing her act like this. Sure, he had been a little over dramatic when it come to tests and forgetting things. When she was a filly, she had bad dreams about and got scared. All fillies did. It was natural. But this was so different, a normal dream or stress, and he wasn't sure what to do to help her. Twilight had finished washing herself off before she had just relaxed under this hot stream of water until it started to go cold. She turned the water off, shook herself dry, and got out of the shower. She dried herself off with her fluffy towel before she started to brush out her mane until she looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. She did feel a lot better now that she was clean, and her mane and tail had been taken care of, but she still felt worried about over the dreams. She turned and trotted down the stairs. She could smell the breakfast Spike had prepared. Smells like pancakes again, she said as she went over into the kitchen to confirm her beliefs. That's right, Twilight. I figure you deserve them, he said as he poured her a glass of tea and brought it over for her, putting the pancakes on a plate and brought them over for her. He had also placed the buttered syrups out for her. Though you already look a lot more cheerful in the last few days, he added, as he noticed a smile on her face and her brushed mane. Thanks, Spike. A good shower can do wonders, she said with a nod at him and smiled as she took a sip of her tea. But I will still go talk to Rarity later today and see if she has any advice about this, she added as she put some butter on her pancakes and dribbled some blueberry syrup on her pancakes this time. Good idea, Twilight. I think today should be just about you. Relaxing. No studying or fretting over anything, Spike said as he looked over at her. She gave him a bit of a look. I'm serious, Twilight. All the studying can't be helping to ease your mind, he said more sternly than Twilight had seen the little dragon act before. But she realized he was right. The study and stress hadn't helped. Okay, Spike. Maybe you're right. She gave in and smiled at him, but she wasn't sure what to do if she wasn't going to be studying. She hadn't really had any free time like this. Of course, she had days she didn't spend studying or working, like when she went to the gala, but that was different. She had stuff planned for those days. Spike smiled at her as he joined her at the table with a small bowl of small gems and a glass of his own special blended tea. I'm sure after a good day relaxing, you'll be as good as new, Spike offered, as he tossed a gem in his mouth and chewed on it. Twilight smiled at him, but she wasn't so sure herself. For her the best way to get over a problem was to study the cause and come up with a solution. It's what she had learned and how she dealt with all of her problems, but she had done that since the problem started, and so far she hadn't come up with anything. If anything, the problem was just getting a lot worse, so she decided to give Spike's suggestion a try. After breakfast, she put her dishes away in the sink and moved out to the main hall of the library. She looked out the window. The weather ponies had finished moving in the clouds. It hadn't started to rain yet, but there was a storm planned for the day. I better head over to Rarity's before the rain sets in. Spike, you ready to go? She called out to Spike, who was still in the kitchen. Sure thing, Twilight, Spike said as he came out of the kitchen and grabbed an umbrella for when it started to rain. Twilight used her magic to pick up Spike and sits him on her back as she heads out the door. She opens the door and makes her way out. She closes the door behind her and starts on her way to Carousel Boutique to visit Rarity. Day 4, afternoon. Twilight took her time and she headed to Carousel Boutique so she could enjoy the day. Even though it was overcast, the fresh air was nice and she enjoyed the smell of moisture in the air before it rained. She looked around town as she walked down the streets to her friend's place. Due to the rain, the streets were for the most part empty. She knocked on the door of the boutique and waited for her to answer. It took a few minutes before Rarity opened the door to greet her. "Oh, hello, darling," Rarity greeted with a pleasant smile, moved out of the way so Twilight could come in. She had on her glasses and looked as if she had been designing a new outfit. Once Twilight had gotten inside, she closed the door and turned to face her visitor. "So, Twilight, Spike, what brings you two over to my place in this weather?" she asked her, taking them to the living space and offered them a place to sit. Spike just smiled and stared quietly as Twilight sat him on a cushion before taking a seat on one herself. "Hello, Rarity. I have something I wanted to talk with you about," Twilight said as she took a deep breath and looked up at her friend. "I'm not sure where to start, though," Twilight admitted with a small sheepish smile. "Well, how about starting from the beginning, Twilight?" Rarity suggested. She noticed the look in Twilight's eyes and it concerned her. "But of course. Where are my manners? Let me get you something to drink. A nice cup of honey tea?" she asked Twilight, who nodded at her. She had seen her friend get pretty overexcited before, but this was different. She looked really worried. She went to the kitchen, prepared some snacks, and a pitcher of hot honey tea for herself and her guest. She brought the severing set back out and placed the mugs in front of Twilight, Spike, and set out one for herself. She also set the tray of snacks down before she poured everyone a cup and sat down. "Now, Twilight, please tell me about it," Rarity said as she floated her teacup up and took a drink. Twilight nodded at Rarity lightly and took a deep breath. "Well, a few days ago I was performing an experiment with Spike, but something went wrong and there was a small explosion. Spike got hid in the head of a book." She looked over at Spike, who was sitting nearby, taking a sip of his tea and holding a cupcake. "Everything's fine, though, but since then I've been getting these really bad dreams. They seem to be progressing to something, though, and from what has happened in the dreams so far," she trailed off. Rarity was silent for a few minutes before speaking up. "That is dreadful, my dear Twilight. Simply dreadful. So you haven't been getting your beauty sleep?" Rarity said as she looked over at Twilight, her eyes full of worry. "But of course you know that Spike is fine and there's no need to worry, don't you?" "I know, Rarity, but I can't help thinking about what could happen if things had gone differently," Twilight said as she took a look at the floor and sighed softly before taking a sip of her and looked back up at Rarity. "It's lucky Spike was hit with a book, and the blast wasn't any worse than it was. In my dream he was hit with a shard of crystals that pierced his heart," she said, her voice growing softer. She spoke and tears formed in her eyes. "And that is your problem, Twilight. You're thinking too much about it," Rarity said as she looked at Twilight. "You simply must stop thinking about what could have happened. That is more than likely why you're having those dreams. You've been so focused on what could have happened it's affecting your dreams. You must find a way to put it out of your mind," Rarity said. She levitated a napkin and used it to dry Twilight's eyes. Twilight considered what she had said and nodded at her slowly. "Of course you're right, Rarity. Thank you. I'm just not sure if I can do that." She smiled a little bit, beside, as she took another sip of her tea. "I just have a hard time clearing my mind when I have a problem like this," she admitted, and looked back up over at Rarity with a light frown. "I know, dear, I know," Rarity said while she watched Twilight quietly. "But you simply must try or you'll never get a good night's sleep." She moved to get up. "Wait here. I have something that should help," Rarity said to Twilight as she smiled before she headed back into the kitchen. She searched around for a few minutes before she floated down a canister of tea and opened it. She moved some of the tea leaves into a smaller canister. She brought the smaller canister out and gave it to Twilight. "This will help soothe you, darling. Just have a cup before you go to bed. It helps me when I'm too stressed to sleep," she said to Twilight with a smile. Twilight took the smaller canister. She opened it up and breathed in the aroma and smiled as she closed it and gave the gift to Spike to carry. "Thank you, Rarity. Me and Spike should get going before the rain starts, though." Twilight said and got up. Spike moved to his feet and got the umbrella. I do feel better talking about this, and the tea should help. Thank you very much, Twilight said to Rarity with a smile. You're welcome, Twilight. Please come to see me if you need any more help, Rarity said and walked with them to the door and opened it. The sky started to look pretty gloomy outside as the stars had gotten darker and there was a soft rumble of thunder. Oh my, you better hurry, Twilight darling. It's starting to look pretty bad out there, Rarity said to them, her eyes up on the clouds in the sky. You're right, Rarity. I'll see you later. Thank you again, Twilight said with a smile to her friend before she headed out the door and used her magic to place Spike on her back. She started to make her way down the street to get back home at a quick trot. She glanced around at the dark clouds and she started to pick up the pace some more, and she wanted to be back home before the rain started to come down. They had made it back to Twilight's place before the rain started, though the threat was ever present the whole time. Soft rumbles of thunder and a few fat flashes of lightning. The wind had even picked up some. Twilight used her magic to open the door and went inside with Spike as she kept hold of the umbrella and canister of tea. She closed the door after she got inside. Spike got off Twilight's back and put away the umbrella before he headed into the kitchen and put away a small canister of tea already given to Twilight. There isn't a lot to do with weather like this, is there, Spike? How about some lunch? Twilight suggested to the baby dragon, and she went to the kitchen as well. She used her magic to take down some things for salad and fresh apples. She hadn't had any of the snacks at Rarity's place, so she was pretty hungry by now. Sounds like a great idea, Twilight. We missed our normal lunch time, Spike said as he looked up at her and drooled at the thought of food, and Twilight just smiled and rolled her eyes slightly. She knew he had some of the snacks. He started to make a salad for both him and Twilight. He put some apple slices in Twilight's and some small pieces of sapphire in his. Twilight smiled as he watched him before she got them both a bottle of apple juice and put it on the table. Spike brought over the salad and put them on the table. I'm glad you had that talk with Rarity. I really think it'll help, he said as he got the silverware before taking a seat at the table. Twilight nodded at him. So do I, Spike. I feel better already after having talked with her. Just getting it all out into the open like that really seemed to have done the trick, she said as she put a straw in both of their drinks before she took a seat at the table. This looks really good, Spike, she said with a smile to the baby dragon. Spike smiled at her and took a drink of the apple juice. Thank you, Twilight, he said to consider for a few moments. Since it's going to be raining soon, what do you want to do today? Since you would normally be studying it all, Spike said as he looked up at her. Twilight thought for a moment as she quietly chewed on her salad before she swallowed. That's a good question, Spike, she said as she thought about it for a few minutes longer before she looked at him. It's been a long time, but we could play some games, she said with a smile. It had been a long time since either of them played games, not since he was a filly in Camelot studying under Princess Celestia. Spike almost choked at the suggestion and looked up at her. You really mean it, Twilight? We haven't done anything like that in years, he asked her. His eyes were big and hopeful. He had tried to get her to take time off her studies to play games after she got older, but she never had wanted to, so he'd given up. Of course I mean it, Spike, she said and smiled at him. She wasn't going to go back on her promise not to study with him, and with the weather turning bad, they couldn't go out and visit any of their friends today. What the hell? Today we can have fun, relax, and play games, she continued with a smile. All right, he said loudly with a big grin on his face before blushing and smiled at her. Thank you, Twilight. It's going to be great. He nodded at her, and they both went back to lunch. Spike used the relative quiet of the time to come up with fun games for them to play to pass the time. Twilight just smiled, glad she made him happy for suggestion. She could use a little fun herself. Something about them dreams still bothered her. That was chapter 4. There's one more chapter left. It's the longest one, and yeah, then I'll be done. So stay tuned.